let's do a hard pivot from one Big Ten East blockbuster to another. We have Rutgers, a 5-point road favorite at Indiana. This game carries an over-under of 40 points. Kelley, I wanted to talk about Rutgers this week because I don't know how many chances we're going to get to talk about the Scarlet Knights, and I try to change things up week to week, talk about different teams, different conferences as we go, so that we don't get stuck in a rut here. But this one kicks off at noon Eastern on the Big Ten Network. The under got hit here too, just like the other one, down from 42 to 39.5 even in some spots, and potentially falling. We need to have a conversation, too, about the 5-2 Rutgers Scarlet Knights, baby. That's what I'm talking about. They're ranked 7th currently in the Big Ten in my ratings. They haven't been that high in a conference since the Big East, so I'm happy to talk about these guys. They did get out a lucky, I think, win is probably the best descriptor for that against Michigan State last week. The Spartans just absolutely collapsed in spectacular fashion in Piscataway. Actually, all 5 of Rutgers' wins this year have come in the vaunted SHI Stadium. Indiana, I do have to note, did part ways with their offensive coordinator a few weeks ago. This isn't brand new news, but I'm not entirely sure that their offensive struggles were a scheme issue. They were at least trying to do something different. They know they didn't have the talent to line up the ball and beat their opponents, especially Ohio State. So they come out and run some sort of option. And to be honest, yeah, they didn't score points, but it did give the Buckeyes defense a little bit of fits at the beginning there as they tried to figure out what was unfolding in front of them. But they dished their offensive coordinator. I don't know if he's a scapegoat or whatever's going on. I think Tom Allen's time in Bloomington is probably close to over. And like I said, they mucked things up. That's how they do it. They drag you down to their game and make you play a slow, ugly game. They did that with Ohio State and Louisville. But then they had that 4 overtime scare against Akron, and then they've lost their last 2 games, a combined score of 96-24. Not entirely sure what happened to the defense that held Ohio State and Louisville to 22 points per game. That's maybe they just ran out of juice. I really don't know. Maybe the tape's out. It's kind of inexplicable. But the biggest mismatch I see in this game is Rutgers' run game versus Indiana's run defense. The Hoosiers are 119th in EPA per rush on the season and 123rd in rushing success rate. On the other side, quarterback Gavin Wimsatt, he took 3 sacks last week, which actually doubled his season total in one game. He's been pretty good at avoiding sacks, and the offensive line's been keeping him pretty upright, pretty clean. I saw a stat this week on Twitter. I completely lost who shared it, and I apologize. I do want to give credit where credit is due. But they showed a correlation of pressure to sack ratios above 20% and being really, really bad in the NFL. Names like Brett Huntley, Jordan Love, Zach Wilson are those that were taking greater than 20% pressure to sack ratios in college. Anyway, not that Wimsatt's like an NFL prospect, but his is under 13%, which is a solid number and 4th best among Big Ten starters.
Brett, this game has a watchability score of 5.8. But believe it or not, it's actually the number 5 game of the early window.
So it makes it on your TVs.
It will for at least the first half. It will. The windows. This is 2 weeks in a row. The windows have been hugely slanted towards later in the day. So just interesting how that works out. But at 5-2, you mentioned it. Rutgers 1.8 more wins than my preseason realistic expectations projected through 7 weeks. That's number 9 nationally on my overachievers list. They're having a really good year in Piscataway. I have Rutgers minus 7.5, which is a 71% win expectancy. Rutgers' power rating is 7 points better now than it was in the preseason. That full touchdown improvement ranks number 8 nationally in terms of who has been upgraded the most during the year by the model. No team has moved up more spots in the power rating rankings than Rutgers, who at number 47 now currently are 34 spots higher than they were in the preseason.
Wow.
So just a ton of improvement for Rutgers. Yeah, it's fun. I post those graphics every Monday now, or Sunday now, in terms of who's moved the most in a week, in the year. And instead of just the top 10, Brett, I've now moved into the full 133 view. A little bit easier, I think, for people to see where their team is, obviously. And it helps me, just from a quick reference glance, to see how good, because within the top 10, you're like, okay, that's good, but how good? Compared to the whole 133, you can see just how great this improvement's been for teams in the top 10, like Rutgers, in these different areas. So all that stuff's on the website. I reference it all the time during prep for this. I hope fans like it. It does take a little bit of time to put together, but I enjoy doing it. For the offense, Rutgers, it's just number 76, but it's this defense that's been incredibly impressive this season. They're currently number 30 ranked defensive unit by my numbers. For Indiana, Brett, you mentioned it. It's been a tough season. The Hoosiers are 2-4. Their only wins have come against FCS, Indiana State, and in overtime against Akron, who's one of the worst teams in the MAC. Indiana's current power rating is negative 6.7, the corresponding ranking of number 94. Both of those are season lows for the Hoosiers. The defense is number 90. The offense continues to be ranked sub 100. They're currently number 104. Even though this game is in Bloomington, Rutgers should have a big advantage on both sides of the ball in this one. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, they're the class of the division. Because of that, there's no conference championship game leverage in this one. I have Rutgers minus 7.5, 29% chance that Indiana beats Rutgers at home for the first time since 2019.
The other thing that's like actually exciting about this game, which, you know, how often do we get to say that about this, is Rutgers wins this game, and they're bowl eligible going into their bye week. And it's a good thing that they have this game, because then they have Ohio State, Iowa, Penn State, and Maryland after that.
Yes, yeah. So, Brett, they're currently sitting on 5 wins, as we mentioned. My projections for regular season win total is 6.5. So they're basically saying, all right, you're going to get this one, and that might be it. But, hey, you mentioned the bowl game. Preseason, and this is on the graphics, too, and I put them there so that we could have these kind of conversations later in the year. What were the preseason expectations for this team? Preseason, by my numbers, maybe Rutgers fans had it more, maybe Rutgers haters had it less. My numbers said 15% chance that Rutgers makes a bowl game. That is now up to an 89% chance. And again, you win this game, it's taken care of. And I would encourage Rutgers to do that because, as you mentioned, that upcoming schedule, my numbers, Iowa, they're projected as a touchdown underdog. Maryland, 3.5 points. The Ohio State and Penn State, don't look, Rutgers fans, it's not pretty.
And I know people probably come to you and say, well, Kelly, your projections were wrong. Here we have Rutgers securing a bowl. No, Rutgers just operating the 15% of their projected preseason. Think of probabilities, guys. I'm just getting ahead of it. Even with an awful total of 40 points, I probably still lean under. It's not going to be a fun bet to make, but it's probably the only play that I have on this game here. Rutgers defense, like you mentioned, pretty dang good. They're 7th in EPA per pass nationally and 15th in overall EPA per play. And Indiana just declines field and offense. They fire their offense coordinator, and they just really don't have it. I don't see it. So, yeah, probably under 40 points if I'm making a play on this game.